of the day.
Notice of motion number 6. Mr Dean to move that the Legislative Council calls upon the Government to further consider the legalisation of medicinal cannabis, having regard to the laws which apply in other Australian jurisdictions, with a view to allowing the prescribing of medicinal cannabis under proper process to those patients whom it would benefit, and also prevent these patients and carers from having to act unlawfully for treatment.
The Honourable Member for Windermere.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, in moving the motion, there was an amendment to it, and I'm not sure if the Deputy Clerk rang there, whereas the addition of the words "and carers" after patients. Oh, you did read. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, look, Mr. President, in moving this motion, I want to thank the members for giving me the time to give notice on Friday the 30th of October. So I thank members for that. And the reason I did that was that this really is a fairly important issue. It really is. And it's really one of those fairly emotional matters, really, when you start and look at some of the issues and some of the concerns that people are being confronted with around this state. You know, when you talk to somebody that is involved right in it, and they are talking to you in amongst tears and so on, it really does get to you. It really does, and you can't help but feel for them. As you would have assumed, the motion following the emotionally written emails I received from Lynn Cleaver regarding the tragic reality of caring for a son, now 29 years of age, who is suffering from severe refractory epilepsy, of which no legal drug has been able to provide help or relief for the management of this severe illness, which sadly is aggravated by an acquired brain injury. However, I have given much time to the subject of this motion over a longer period. So it's not just coming from that letter as received from Ms. Cleaver, from Lynn Cleaver. I've been looking at this for a long, long period of time, and in fact I've been discussing it, Mr. President, with a number of people and with other members of Parliament as well, both this place and the other place. So it's a matter that is of great concern. I refer you to the adjournment speech I made on the 29th of October, and while I would like to read it again because it sends a powerful message to all and hopefully the government, I will not do so other than to repeat some of the substantial points coming from it to put my position forward here in what I believe is to be the right way. Lynn Cleaver is no different to all mums and dads, Mr. President, in wanting what is the best known care and treatment of a son who is in a desperate situation, requiring the most effective management of his most serious illness. The management of which has gone on now ever since this boy or this man was 6 years of age. So it's gone on over many, many, many years, Mr. President. And Jeremy has trialled many anticonvulsant medications, so many of them without success. His carer and loving mum has now taken a course to care for her son that could see her incarcerated. It could see her jailed. This is the desperate situation she finds herself in. The fact is, medicinal cannabis oil, does give Jeremy relief, and it gives the family relief. And without known side effects. Jeremy has been treated by specialists, neurologists, and by everybody else, and right to the top of the medical services in this state and wider, Mr. President. And there was support for the family to access medicinal cannabis for his care, but while supported by the TGA, that's the Therapeutic Goods Administration, it has not been supported by Tasmanian Medicines Access and Advisory Committee, known as TMAC. On August the 29th, 2020, Lynn Cleaver was made aware the latest application by another neurologist, Dr. Aaron D'Souza, had also been rejected. I understand the TGA, and that's what I'll refer to the Therapeutic Goods Administration as from here on, gave its approval to the application, That is, access for Jeremy to cannabinoid medicine. But as I said, it was rejected by TMAC, to my understanding. So, looking at this, I think it's important to have a look at the position of the TGA and how do they sit in this whole thing. The TGA, Mr. President, is Australia's regulatory authority of therapeutic goods. They carry out a range of assessments and monitoring activities to ensure therapeutic goods available in Australia are of an acceptable standard, with the aim of ensuring the Australian community has access within a reasonable time to therapeutic advancements. So what I understand about the position here is that after several applications, access to this form of medication, it was approved by the TGA in their position. I now take a look at what position does TMAC hold. And Mr. President, in looking at TMAC, I must say that when I first started to look at them, I tried to Google it, I tried to do some research, and it was very difficult to really find anything about TMAC. I got, I guess, quite frustrated, or my staff did as well, I think. So we made contact with the library here, our parliamentary library, and I just commend them on the work that they do and the way in which they went about this. They too were stumped to some degree in getting good information. In fact, they went back through Hansard, back to previous discussions that had taken place here in relation to this body, and they came up with some evidence and information coming out of those processes. And
Mr. President, TMAC, not stand for. What you said, Therapeutical Goods Association.
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, I'd gone on from them. I'd moved on from them, and I'm now on to TMAC, which is the Tasmanian Medicines Access and Advisory Committee.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Who found it for you?
Sorry?
Who found it for you?
Yes, you certainly helped. You certainly did, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for that.
That's right.
Because it was just a difficult situation. So yes, I thank you, Member for Murchison, for providing some support here as well in trying to get to the bottom of this.
Well, thank the honourable member for that clarification, and apologies for missing the transition.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I went ahead and on that information, I wrote what I thought was a reasonable position and understanding of TMAC. I then, in amongst all of this, I also wrote to the Health Department, Mr. President, through the Minister, to find out more about this organisation. And lo and behold, this morning I received some documentation back from the department or from the Minister, and I thanked them for that. But that was a couple of weeks ago, so it's taken a little while for the information to come through. And I just want to quote the information that came back. I think it's fairly important to put this on the record. The Tasmanian Medicines Access and Advisory Committee, and it's done in dot point 4, and I'll read it and ask you to bear with me on this, and I quote, "The Tasmanian Medicines Access and Advisory Committee, TMAC in brackets, is a multidisciplinary committee consisting of statewide representation of medical, nursing, pharmacy, consumer and Department of Health representatives. Medical representation is from a variety of medical and surgical specialties, and TMAC will also nominate additional specialists who may be consulted and/or co-opted when relevant." Second point, TMAC oversees the use of medicines within the Tasmanian Health Service, THS in brackets, by providing direction, advice and recommendations on the safe, quality and cost-effective use of medicines, utilising evidence-based principles. Third dot, the committee considers applications for new medicines to be added to the Tasmanian Medicines Formulary, including assessing the risks associated with any pharmaceutical company-funded medication access program. Fourth, when a required medicine is not formulary listed and the prescriber considers that a formulary application for a patient group is not warranted, a THS prescriber can apply to TMAC to use the medicine for a specific indication in a single patient, in brackets, individual patient application. That's known as an IPA. The fifth one, TMAC has delegated authority from the Secretary for Health for review of applications made under the Controlled Access Scheme for unregistered cannabinoid medicines. These applications are assessed in line with established TMAC processes for assessing applications for unregistered medicines. Unlike other medicines, these applications are concurrently assessed by a delegate of the Secretary for Health under the Poisons Act 1971 to streamline both of the necessary application processes required for cannabis access in Tasmania. Next dot point, 6. Approved IPOs are valid for a time period set by the committee or may be approved for ongoing use. Extensions to time-limited approvals are considered by the committee on request of the prescriber after the initial approval period. 7th point, importantly, TMAC approval of medicines via either approval of a formulary listing or an IPA allows for supply of the medicine through a THS pharmacy. This supply mechanism ensures that patients are able to access medicines at a subsidised cost, equal to the cost of a pharmaceutical benefit scheme, PBS in brackets, listed medicine. This pathway is only available to THS specialists and supply can only occur through THS pharmacy on prescription from a THS prescriber. Next dot point 8. The TMAC process allows equitable access for THS patients to non-PBS medicines which have been approved to be prescribed in safe, efficacious and cost-effective circumstances. Next dot point, TMAC is Tasmania's representative on the National Council of Australian Therapeutic Advisory Groups, that's CATAG, C-A-T-A-G. Adoption of the CATAG guiding principles for the roles and responsibilities of drug and therapeutics committees in Australian public hospitals ensures that the activities of the committee are in line with nationally agreed best practice principles. And the last dot point is the Chief Medical Officer within the Department of Health is the executive sponsor of the committee, and the committee has reported obligations to the chief executives of the THS hospitals, unquote. I thought it was fairly important to put that because, as I said, you've got to understand it. It's not easy to understand the position and where they sit and what's happening, and their right to overrule the Commonwealth position or organisation of the Therapeutic Goods Administration. So I can skip the next few pages I'd written, and thanks, as I said, to the library. If we get back to Jeremy's issue again, Mr. President, TMAC clearly stated that Jeremy, this is on my advice, must trial and fail all conventional medicines before being considered for a medicinal cannabis prescription. There were still 3 drugs available that he had not tried, again on my advice. The evidence on these drugs is that they cause agitation, behavioural issues and suicidal ideation. What Lynn Cleaver also says is that Jeremy is extremely medication sensitive and previous drugs taken have caused serious behavioural problems. The family's had to work with that. And in fact, the son, Jeremy, has had to work through that as well. One remaining drug to be trialled has a warning on it of possible blindness. And Jeremy is non-compliant and non-verbal, so any eye testing would be useless to monitor his eyesight. Again, this is all an advice I've received and I've no reason to not accept it. Would you, I asked a rhetorical question, would you take this risk with your son or daughter already suffering serious health issues when another product is working, albeit it's an illegal product in their case? The Legislative Council, Mr. President, in 2014, and it was the Administration Committee A, and a member for Murchison, and other members, I think, in this House, Member for Hobart and others, would have been involved in this inquiry. But it was a robust inquiry. It was quite a large report, and members, that's available if members want to look at it. And I had a good look at that report. I'm just going to take 1 or 2 of the recommendations from that report, Mr. President. Others might want to talk more about it. The committee made the following recommendation. That is, 1, the Tasmanian government introduces legislation to immediately provide protection to individuals who are currently using medicinal cannabis from criminal charges associated with possession and administration of medicinal cannabis on compassionate grounds. two.
Well, before we go off at number one, if I might, Mr. President, the government didn't support that. What their response was, oh, well, the police won't press a charge, prosecution with it. I mean, that's, if you've got a law that the police are going to ignore, it's just stupid.
Absolutely. I just couldn't agree more.
I think that's pretty clear what the Honourable Member for Murchison thinks
of that first one, yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed since.
The second recommendation, Mr. President, was that the Tasmanian Government develops a legislative framework to enable the use of medicinal cannabis under medical supervision, including the preparation, cultivation and supply of medicinal cannabis. Unquote. This is all about the medical profession having a big say in this, a big involvement in this. It's not a matter of a family member simply saying, we don't want to try these other drugs, we're not interested in that. We're going to go down the illegal pathway. That's not the case. It's not the case. That's not what's happening. It just isn't. And I think that the people who, and probably some people within the government who are opposed to it, are probably looking at it from that perspective or that point of view. I would ask them not to.
Support that one either.
Didn't know that one either.
Support that one either, if you read the response.
The third recommendation was, and I quote, the Tasmanian Government support a cooperative approach between Tasmanian research institutions and mainland jurisdictions to facilitate clinical research in this area. Unquote. So once again, I'm not sure where they went there, but the member from Murchison might want to be able to tell us a little more on that. The fourth recommendation was...
That was supported. The third recommendation was supported.
That's great. Fourth one, the Tasmanian Government adopts a cooperative approach with other states and territories in relation to the legalisation of the prescription, administration, possession and cultivation of cannabis for medicinal use. Medicinal use. It wasn't quoted twice there. I repeated it a second time. And 5, cultivars of cannabis containing low levels of THC should not be treated in the same way as cultivars of cannabis containing high levels of THC in terms of the National Classification System of Scheduling of Medicines. And the last one was, and I read that, the Tasmanian Government engages with companies which have the appropriate expertise and capacity to progress the cultivation, extraction and processing of cannabinoids within the existing and/or future regulatory framework, unquote. So that's the recommendations of that committee, who called many witnesses as a part of the inquiry that they concluded and they conducted. That was back in 2014, and we have not seen much progress since. A Commonwealth Senate committee did an inquiry into current barriers to patient access to medicinal cannabis in March this year. Well, that's when the inquiry came out, I think, in March of this year. I think the final report was handed in, I think. And just 2 of the recommendations I referred to from that report, Mr. President. Recommendation 11 was, the committee recommends that the Tasmania Government immediately join all other jurisdictions in participating in the Therapeutic Goods Administration's single national online application pathway for accessing unregistered medicinal cannabis and reducing state-based requirements for medicinal cannabis approval. Unquote. A very strong recommendation made by the Senate, by that committee. Again, supported by much evidence in that committee making that recommendation, Mr. President. And recommendation 20 was, from that inquiry, the committee recommends that the Australian Government, through COAG, encourage a review of state and territory criminal legislation in relation to amnesties for the possession and or cultivation of cannabis for genuine self-medication purposes and current drug driving laws and their implications for patients with legal medicinal cannabis prescriptions. Unquote. A very, very strong recommendation, and it speaks for itself. So, Mr. President, why is Tasmania so different to the rest of the country when it comes to accessing medicinal cannabis? If Lynn, this is a sad situation, if Lynn and Jeremy lived in another state other than Tasmania, they would have access to this medicine. And the family would be able to live close to a normal life and without Jeremy suffering in the way he would without access to an illegal substance that his mother is prepared to put her credibility and reputation on the line, as I said, in risking prosecution and jail. She fears, Mr. President, the driving up of her laneway of a police car. She fears that because she has openly said that she produces this product and produces the oil for medicinal reasons. She doesn't hide that. So she fears when that police car will drive up her lane one day and confiscate a product which is a medicine and is helping. Of course, with a substance that has only been legally available in Australia and it's for a fairly short period of time, there are multiple Commonwealth Acts that apply to medicinal cannabis. Even though it's a short time, there are multiple acts, and I'll just refer to some of those. And in doing this, Mr. President, I refer to the Victorian health legislation where they put a succinct explanation together on their website. I went to their website to get this, and it's quite succinct, and that's what I'll refer to. Commonwealth legislation. The Commonwealth legislation restricts the cultivation, manufacture, supply and use of narcotic drugs in accordance with international obligations in these areas. It also ensures that therapeutic goods sold in Australia meet suitable standards of safety, quality and efficacy, and places restrictions on the importation of controlled medicines. Commonwealth legislation and standards regulating medicinal cannabis in Australia include the Narcotics Drugs Act 1967, and that's administered by the Commonwealth Office of Drug Control, ODC. It provides the Commonwealth Government with powers to meet international obligations relating to the regulation of drug manufacture. The Narcotic Drugs Amendment Bill 2016 amended the Narcotic Drugs Act 1967 to allow for the cultivation and manufacture of cannabis for medicinal and related scientific purposes in Australia. It establishes a comprehensive national licensing and permit scheme to regulate the cultivation, production and management and manufacture of cannabis in Australia for medicinal and scientific purposes. The Therapeutic Goods Act 1989, administered by the Commonwealth Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA, provides a regulatory framework to ensure therapeutic goods supplied in Australia, such as medicinal cannabis, meet acceptable standards of quality and safety. It sets out how to apply for a medicine to be approved and registered in the Australian Register for Therapeutic Goods, that's called ARTG, ARTG in brackets, in order to be legally supplied in Australia. It also provides a number of mechanisms to enable access to unapproved therapeutic goods, including the Special Access Scheme and Authorised Prescriber Scheme. The TGA have also compiled Therapeutic Goods Order number 93, Mr. President, defining the quality requirements required by all unapproved medicinal cannabis products available in Australia. So, following on from that, what is the position in other states and territories? And I'll keep this fairly succinct, Mr. President, and go into any long detail on this, but Victoria. Any doctor in Victoria can prescribe medicinal cannabis for a patient with any condition, if they believe it is clinically appropriate and have the necessary Commonwealth and or state government approvals, that is TGA approval in their case. New South Wales. Any doctor in New South Wales can prescribe medicinal cannabis for a health condition if they believe it is the appropriate treatment option and they have obtained the relevant approvals. And you need to see the New South Wales Government Centre for Medicinal Cannabis Research and Innovation for more details, a lot more details there to cover that. Queensland. Any registered medical practitioner in Queensland can prescribe medicinal cannabis for any patient with any condition if they believe it is clinically appropriate and have obtained the required Commonwealth and or state approvals. South Australia. Patients in South Australia can access medicinal cannabis on prescription from their authorised medical practitioner if appropriate. The medical practitioner must have the relevant approvals. Western Australia. Any medical practitioner in Western Australia can prescribe medicinal cannabis if they believe it is suitable for the patient and they have the necessary approvals again. Australian Capital Territory. The health practitioner can prescribe medicinal cannabis if they believe it may be effective for their condition of the patient and they have Commonwealth and Territory approvals. Northern Territory is a little different. Northern Territory, patients in the Northern Territory can access medicinal cannabis through an Australian doctor who is authorised by the TGA. The Northern Territory's Department of Health recommends that patients are referred by a GP to an appropriate specialist who may be based outside the Northern Territory for assessment.
Yeah, that was the answer that I threw you, Mr. President. That was the reference in the question that I asked at question time, where it said at least one other jurisdiction recommends referral to an appropriate specialist. So that would be NT
Northern Territory.
Case.
Northern Territory, yeah. Tasmania. A GP can refer you to a relevant medical specialist. The medical specialist can then prescribe medical cannabis in limited circumstances where it is clinically appropriate and conventional treatment has been unsuccessful. The specialist must receive the relevant approvals, must be approved by the TGA, and then it appears the State Committee of TMAC. And it appears that they can override the TGA, and the leader's able to cover off on that in any response that the government might want to make.
You know, through you, Mr. President, do you know who the members are on TMAC?
I do. In fact, it's in my folder, I think. I've got the list there somewhere. So, pardon?
I don't want to bring it to you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in the list there. I had a list of them there somewhere, but I'm not sure if I can find it quickly. Thanks. I've certainly got it. And I'll try and.
Perhaps in your summing up, honourable member.
It may be in my summing up. You're right. You're absolutely right, and I think that's where I'll address it if I can. Yep. We'll go now to the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. And what they have said is that further research into the safety and effectiveness of medicinal cannabis products is needed as the current evidence is limited. And I think we all accept that. They then go on to say, but the organisation does suggest there is a possible role for medicinal cannabis products in a number of areas. That's the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners.
Who are well respected.
Yeah, well respected, absolutely. You can't get any rungs higher on a ladder than where they are. So I'm a great one on this status level. I just want to refer to a quote, Mr. President, from a website I went to, which is the greenfund.com. Why are Tasmanians' weed laws so strict? I'll just refer to some of the issues that they refer to, and I quote, as a recent Senate inquiry into barriers facing the Australian medical cannabis landscape outlined, Tasmania is now the only state which doesn't utilise the online, expedited and simplified application process, that is, SAS-B portal route. As a result, Tasmanians' medical cannabis prescriptions are seriously lagging, as is their latest information. The most recent patient data available says that as of November 2018, only 7 patients have been prescribed medicinal cannabis products. I understand that that's now, I know it's gone up from there, I'm not quite sure what it is, but once again, the leader might be able to come up with the current figures as of today or yesterday. I think it has gone up. Quote, continuing to quote, to put this number in perspective, Althea Group Holdings, one of Australia's leading medical cannabis companies, is prescribing between 500 and 600 patients across the country every single month. By not adopting the online SAB portal method, Tasmanian patients who desperately need medical cannabis products have largely been unable to do so. One of these patients was Jeremy, I'm still quoting Mr President from that website. One of these patients was Jeremy Bester, a 28-year-old Tasmanian man who suffered from severe refractory epilepsy. Jeremy began using cannabis as a treatment in 2014, as a last resort when all other medicines had proved ineffective. And to his and his mother's surprise, cannabis use resulted in an immense improvement in Jeremy's condition. This prompted Jeremy's mother, Lynn Cleaver, to begin purchasing the plant online and eventually growing it herself. Ms Cleaver gained first-hand sight into the difficulties that arise when trying to follow the legal route to be prescribed cannabis in Tasmania, as her applications had been rejected on numerous occasions. Moreover, even if she were approved, she would be looking at a $60,000 to $100,000 annual price tag for a legal prescription for Jeremy, while a homegrown method costs as little as $20 per week, unquote. That's taken from that website that I referred to, whatever it was, the greenfund.com website. Perhaps, Mr President, an unexpected benefit of Tasmania being so far behind the rest of the country is that we have been afforded the opportunity to watch and learn about what is and isn't working around the country, where access is not as restricted. So we can learn from that. But I'm not sure that we need to continue learning from it for the next 20 years. I think there comes a time when you've got to say enough's enough. You've got enough information, you've got enough evidence, and we need to move forward. Medicinal cannabis products are incredibly expensive. For example, the neurologist advised Lynn Cleaver, that a legal cannabis prescription would have cost the THS, that's the Tasmanian Health Service, between $60,000 and $100,000 annually. I'm not quite sure what that figure comes from, but that's what I got from my research that was undertaken. Obviously, these sorts of costs are prohibitive for patients, with many of them being on a disability support pension. The cost varies for the condition being treated, of course, and there are some people that are managing to afford their medicinal cannabis product. Many patients, Mr President, are not refilling their scripts due to cost and are returning to the green market. And that's not what we want. It's not really what we want. There is no reason to think it will be any different here in Tasmania. Many patients will not be able to afford the products. The clinics operating on the mainland are charging sometimes several $100s just for the consultation and application processes, with added cost of the medicine. Some of the products are quite weak and patients are consuming more, higher cost per prescription. Supply is inconsistent with the imports, patients sometimes waiting days or weeks for the medicine or not getting it at all, and having to change brand or medicine type. Identifying a willing GP, Mr President, or specialist is also difficult. It's not easy. While I accept we need to demonstrate care in the prescribing of and use of medicines, there comes a time in the life of a person for some element of risk to be taken, to bring relief from suffering and to restore some quality of life. The risk levels need to be minimised, and that is the position we have with medicinal cannabis. There have been many trials, much research done, and it is being used to provide support, relief and control of illnesses where traditional medicines have not successfully worked. It is accepted, and I accept that, and I think we all do, that more research is required in this area, and that's being done. Right? Nobody's saying we should stop our research. Nobody's saying that at all. I was going to give a personal situation here, and I'll just very briefly, I don't want to identify the person, but I have a good friend currently suffering from a terminal sickness, and life expectancy is very, very short, who has had access to medicinal cannabis, and the family are saying that has given him relief. It has given him some quality. some improved quality. It's not good, but an improvement on where he was. My position there isn't that good? Isn't that good in that situation? That a person can get some relief, some better quality in their life at that stage with what's happening. Doesn't matter. In my view, it doesn't. It's helping. It's helping.
Through you, Mr. President, having it in a controlled environment or a controlled process would have to be a better outcome.
That's the ultimate. You're right, and that's what these people are about. They're saying it needs to be a controlled, proper access to this product, and that's what they want. That's what they want. They don't want to have to sneak around, and as I guess Lynn Cleaver probably does, and as said she has done, looking down the laneway to see who's next coming up the laneway. That's not what should be happening.
And also, too, by interjection, Mr. President, having that access in that controlled process, you would expect would assist in the research.
Yes.
Because people would possibly be willing to partake in the research.
Absolutely.
Would add value to the information.
Absolutely. Look, I go back to this family because they are well known now in Tasmania for what's happening and what's going. In fact, to some extent on the mainland. Lynn Cleaver said to me the other day when she was talking to me about this, and I went to her about this motion again, as I should have done, and I did. And she said, Ivan, I've got to say that when your name was mentioned, I really had second thoughts about going anywhere near you because of your background. She said, I just didn't know. Didn't know whether I should do that or not. And she explained that to me, how uncomfortable she felt about doing that. And I'm very pleased that she did. And as she said, she's pleased that she did as well in all of those circumstances. And I think I can blame our past member of Rosebery's for that, who also was assisting the Cleavers in going down this path as well. And I think it was Kerry that recommended that Lynn have a talk to me, that I would see things not the way of the law, as it were, when I was perhaps a police officer. People would ask me, do I support cannabis use generally? No, I don't. No, I don't. Not at this time, not at all. I can't support that. I've experienced many cases as a detective, Mr. President, where cannabis was the cause of, in many instances, very serious crime, where a person was either high or what have you, or they were committing the crime to access cannabis and access the money to get cannabis and all of that. So I experienced quite a lot of that, but the jury's still out on that. So, but that's where I sit there. I support medicinal cannabis use, properly authorised by doctors, all of those people that have got the background knowledge to understand it all and to prescribe and know what traditional medicines are doing. I support that. It is not good enough for us to play around while Rome burns, Mr. President. Knowing that people are suffering and that we have people prepared to act in a criminal way to relieve that suffering. I would urge the government to treat this issue as a high priority and to make the access to medicinal cannabis with a doctor intervention, medical intervention, realistic and achievable, and in doing so, to also consider the laws in place in the rest of the country. In conclusion, Mr. President, I just want to paraphrase a request made by a provider of medicinal cannabis for a demonstration of humanity and support for those people forced by an uncontrolled love of a family member to defy the law. This was given to me, and I'm just paraphrasing the comments that were passed on to me. It is important we voice the need for a patient register exemption for medicinal cannabis and for self-supply of cannabis therapy, whereby patients would register with the support of their treating doctor and be known to police with documentation. I understand patients who have recently been raided were advised if they could supply documentation to police that their medicine had been supported by way of medicinal intervention, it would be protected from confiscation. If such course was taken on this advice, if correct, the medical cannabis in brackets, would be protected from confiscation, and patients, carers would also be protected from charges of possession, cultivation, and administer medicinal cannabis. We would also like a review of the controlled access scheme and medicinal cannabis access in Tasmania. We need a round table where all stakeholders can come together and discuss medicinal cannabis access generally in Tasmania. So far, the end user has been ignored in this whole process. And that was the end of that conversation and my paraphrasing of that position. This was raised with me by a family in a very desperate situation. This is a sound position in my opinion, and I call on the Minister and Government to bring together all stakeholders for the purpose of a comprehensive discussion on medicinal cannabis and before more parents, carers get hurt and continue to suffer. Please do not procrastinate on this matter any longer. We know of one family openly defying the law because of a love for a family member. There would be others, and it's just not an acceptable situation. I commend this motion to the House and ask for your support.